Chapter 21. Taming the Dragon. For a time. And he carried me away in the spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God, having the glory of God, and her light was like unto a stone most precious, even like a jasper stone, clear as crystal, and had a great wall and high, and had 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels, and names written thereon, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. On the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and in them the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. And he that talked with me had a golden reed to measure the city, and the gates thereof, and the wall thereof. And the city lies foursquare, and the length is as large as the breadth. And he measured the city with the reed 12,000 furlongs. The length and breadth and the height of it are equal. And he measured the wall thereof 144 cubits, according to the measure of a man, that is, of the angel. John the Revelator, Revelation 21, verses 10 through 17. Rohan needed belladonna and several other things. He had seen many flora of the kind he parlayed while working in the spice trade. Here such flowers were always more robust, in perpetually perfect bloom, and it made sense. The bees were incredible. Some flowers that would have been like a fist were now the size of Rohan's head. He found his way out of the cave and was thrilled to discover a rolling hillside full of eye-watering color in all hues, somehow more perfect in the uncommon light of that domain, stretching as far as the eye could see, over the top of the hill and onward, very far onward. As he looked up, he saw the great intersection of the cube, and realized this dragon slumbering in a cave nestled under land near its base, centered to the cube's western face. Behind, a perfectly indigo sea undulated peacefully. Rohan turned and beheld the monstrosity falling out of visibility in all directions. He was nearer than ever, and it was greater than ever, stretching high into the heavens and dominating the entire horizon, bright, but somehow beyond the eye's ability to fully take in. It became like a new sky. He must have been closer than the thing's width. What did Himari say? 1,400 miles? 1,500? And a mile is over 5,000 feet? And feet are like this? He measured it out with his hands. He finally concluded he was indeed less than half the width of the massive structure away. It seemed just over the hill, but he knew it was still quite far simply because of where his eye lost it against the sky. Even the atmosphere behind appeared more golden here than violet, as the city itself gave the world light. Part of the reason it stretched out of visibility was because that light got so bright tracking the golden opus. It made the eyes water to behold it dead on too long. He pulled out the maps he secured from Jin and Kyun. Something caught his eye. There was a great blank area on both. They were incomplete, certainly, but this was something different. Portals represented by dots and coordinates were like stars across those creased pages. But in one area, describing a rectangular shape, they all stopped. It's the city, Rohan breathed. He looked up at the glittering reflective surface of the Colossus, gold with gem-like inlay, something that made the heart pound. The city had no rifts, no portals inside. But the points that connected those to Yakutsk, those coordinates were diagonal from his position on the outside of the cube, but almost at its gates, somewhere near its center, just beyond the north-facing side. So I have a journey the width of the cube. From here to there, he bridged the distance with his fingers. When he put down the map, in a strange way, he seemed to see the very route imprinted on the ground, up over the hill, toward the final destination of his burden, the golden crystal cube. He bowed and thanked the Timeless One. The path had returned once more. He was reaching the final stages of his journey. When he came to that far portal, with the dragon, When he came to it, he would be at the gates of his final peak. His heart pounded all the faster. Rohan ran about the hill as quickly as he could, identifying what he would need for the dragon. He put together a cocktail of a dozen different flowers, capping it with a variety of belladonna blooms. They contained a substance that was often lethal for men. It was very easy to merely touch the purified form of it and become so affected death came knocking. Nightshade, some called it. There were different varieties, but in people the tiniest amount essentially blanked the mind if it wasn't lethal. It transformed human beings into figures on a game board to be manipulated as the player desired. The effects would last a day or so. For dragons, the effects would wear away much faster. While the beasts had their lethal dose, administering it required such a great quantity. Rohan had never heard of any rider incidentally expiring a beast in such a way. Not when the animal was of riding age, that is. Smaller dragons, younger ones, there was a risk there. He would have no such troubles today. Once Rohan had everything gathered, he carefully compacted it together. He briefly considered gutting the cat and putting the package inside, but knew that was totally out of the question. He needed the cat. It also wouldn't be a very nice thing to do to White Paw. Still, he had an issue. Generally, it was best to couple a meat package with the slaving flower, the hypnotic belladonna, and nestle the nugget of gold in its very center. Dragons liked meat. Rohan was loath to drip his own blood on the package. Then the beast would remember the flavor and perhaps find Rohan an appealing snack should the slaving flower wear off too fast. Then he remembered the hood of his thick coat, the head of the furry bear. He removed it, cut it away, and stuffed the floral package deep inside, dropping in the golden watch as the final cherry on top. When he returned to the cave, White Paw remained sleeping softly atop the dragon. He looked up as Rohan entered, twitching briefly, then squinted his eyes, let out a mild and stretched. Soon he came trotting down the rocky height of the dragon. They were at its back. The head would be around the bulking curve like a hillside. White Paw's size to the dragon was something like the size of a mouse to a man. Rohan would be like a cat. The mouse crawling about, the dragon wouldn't notice. Rohan would be noticed. He carefully gathered White Paw into the military-grade cat pack he borrowed, setting it in front of the cavern's entryway. "Ah!" White Paw protested. "Shh!" The cat almost seemed to roll his eyes, but did make no further noise. Rohan crept around the side of the dragon. Under his right arm, the bear's head packed with psychedelic flowers and a tasty nougat of gold. There was a low rumble, and a spiral of dust danced by, slightly warm. So the dragon's tail was immediately to Rohan's right, and further along was the head. Dragons slept curled like cats, tail to nose and tight. He came around. Enough light filtered in from the far end of the cavern that he could make out the beast. It had chosen a fine wide cave for its lair, with a great view that overlooked endless flowers limned in the gold of New Jerusalem and cradled in the peaceful reverberations of an ideal nearby sea. This dragon was at least the size of Ajagara. He did not know how it came to be in this realm, or was resting when Rohan discovered it. Maybe the creature was bored or sad. The dragon breathed and Rohan froze, feeling warm, dry wind cover him. He resumed his crouching advance and came to the nose of the beast, carefully placing the bear's head before its nostrils. He made his way back against the wall as quietly and quickly as he could. The beast began to sniff at the package. Rohan heard a low rumble. He paid no mind to sound now and ran around the edge of the chamber, headed for the cat. He picked up White Paw's pack, shouldered it, and crept to the cave's edge, listening intently. He heard a rumble and then an excited rustling of limbs as the animal awoke and stretched out. The whole cavern shook. The creature's legs were still so long they had been covered deep in earth. As he began to move for the first time in ages, the dragon pulled himself free of rock and soil. He must have been in his final phase, hibernating to death. Dragons seldom remained idle so long otherwise. They simply become still. They simply became still until they expired, if they didn't tear one another to death in some territorial dispute before. Now the beast fully extended himself, groaning and waking his body. He blinked at what Rohan put before his nostrils, then smelled the pill more closely. In a moment there came a bellowing sound from the cavern and a puff of smoke, soon wreathing the massive scarlet mane that ran to winged shoulders of the old dragon. Rohan pulled himself back from the mouth of the cave just in time. The dragon looked right where he just was. Then the dragon turned back and sniffed the package once more, prodding it. Finally, tentatively, he took the shriveled bear's head in his mouth, and Rohan heard the crunching of bone and gold. 1 or 2 minutes later, Rohan could hear a loud, deep, mellow purr. Dragons purred when they ingested gold and became calm. It didn't take much to satiate them. A coin would do for about 10 minutes. With the belladonna and other spices, the effect was exponentially compounded, and the creature wouldn't be able to move unless Rohan told him to. Then he would continue until he was bade to cease. Eventually, one could train a dragon in this way such that it required less and less gold, less and less anesthetic, and soon the dragon came to know its rider. In a pinch, though, a dragon could be called to heel with the right flowers. Rohan emerged from the tunnel mouth and walked slowly toward the dragon. Now that he was awake, the mighty beast's iridescent skin made waves of color front to back. The speed and disjointed nature of these waves told Rohan all he needed to know about the animal's state of mind. Slowly the dragon turned to regard him, swaying slightly. He was long and thin in the middle, with strangely short legs at the front and back. Wings came from his shoulders, and his face was that of a sickly grinning iguana or salamander slathered in scales, then wreathed in countless thorny horns bent in a forward attitude ahead of a reddish-orange hairy mane. At that moment, the dragon's grin looked like Rohan imagined he himself might were he to take down an entire barrel of wine single-handedly. "In the name of the Timeless One, you serve me now, Faded Mane," Rohan said. The dragon rumbled. For the first time, Whitepaw seemed to realize there was a huge monster in the cave. Perhaps before, he assumed the depth of such noise indicated a natural process. Cats do learn to accept things like thunder, at least more readily than dogs. Now, Whitepaw knew he made a huge mistake, and he started trying to escape the military-grade cat pack on Rohan's back, only succeeding in giving Rohan an incidental massage through the thick fabric of the carrier and his bearskin coat. Rohan turned over his shoulder. "It's okay. Be calm," he said. The cat didn't listen. The dragon regarded him mellowly. "You will be Terminus, for with you our destiny closes." Terminus made a huffing noise. "I'm glad it suits you. Now, down." Rohan stretched his hand out flat and pushed toward the ground, crouching himself. The dragon mirrored him. He ran around and carefully massaged the lizard behind holes that were its ears as its chin came against rock. Terminus made a louder purring sound, like a low growl, and Rohan felt the beast shiver appreciatively, then heard a scraping sound and saw one of its spindly legs was beating against the rock of the cave. It shook the whole cavern, causing dust to rain down. "Good dragon, Terminus," Rohan said, and carefully pulled himself along the animal's rocky scales to the point between its shoulder blades where were its great wings. Delicately, Rohan maneuvered his way to the back of the dragon's neck and found he could reach several horns on either side of its great head. Whitepaw cowered against the far end of the cat pack against his back, making growling noises. Rohan carefully anchored his boots into the scales of the beast. Terminus moved his head around, but Rohan made soothing, musical noises to arrest the creature's motion. Leaning forward, he looped portions of his bearskin coat into the scales and horns atop the dragon's head. He looked like a man-shaped yarmulke behind the grinning stoned visage of a boat-sized evil iguana. Now he was flat over the back of the creature's head with a forward eye. He gripped horns, found his bearings, and saw what the dragon saw. "Okay, Terminus," Rohan said, and began to whistle. The whistle was in a very high pitch, and would prompt the dragon to move as it needed to escape the sound. This was a bit of a ride, as Terminus would look left and right, exhaling forcefully, wondering where the noise came from. Finally, they were out of the cave, and Rohan quit whistling. Now was the time to pull backward on the horns, which would bring the dragon's eyes to the sky. "Now, Terminus, fly," said Rohan, and kicked the edge of a dragon wing, keeping the lizard's head pointed toward the great city that extended infinite to heaven. The beast ran, fast and winding as a reptile, and his great wings beat at the air in long, slow rhythm. "Come on!" Rohan cried. "Mmph," replied Terminus in fire. "The sky is yours, Terminus!" Rohan could tell the dragon was old, not only for how faded the red mane behind his great horned head was. "You take too long to leave ground, Terminus." The dragon scrambled over a cliff face, blustering smoke like an old engine, completely unlike the lusty fire of a young dragon taking to air. He had to get momentum. Terminus became airborne through a plume of his own flame, though on a trajectory that would take him straight into the dark blue sea. Rohan had to duck into the dragon's head to avoid the fire. Terminus made a rumbling noise, and Rohan straightened up again, then pulled back on his horns, feeling his stomach turn in a way it hadn't since his first ride, before he grew his first beard, in the days of the sun which characterized his youth. His hair stood on end. He hollered. The cat caterwauled. The dragon bellowed. Finally, Terminus found his speed and beat his wings proper, first flying low over the water before raising in altitude and heading out to sea. Rohan carefully pulled the right horn toward him, which caused the dragon to list. Terminus would beat his wings in a pattern. 1, 2, 3, glide. 1, 2, 3, glide. The beast turned. All Rohan could see was cliff, stretching high in the sky. The dragon came to fly along it, slowly coming higher and higher as they faced northward, until eventually they were even with the edge of the rocky expanse, and Rohan could see the cavern from which they came. He pulled delicately back on both horns, raising the dragon's eyes. Terminus started going higher and started flapping faster, suddenly finding he enjoyed what he was doing. Now the dragon became more lively, and soon Rohan could see the great hill of flowers, and now, over the hill of flowers, hundreds of miles away, beyond visibility, beyond distant peaks of white, it was behind that great chain of jagged mountains, a range of majesty and glory, but just hills of dirt before New Jerusalem. "We have far to go," Rohan said, but even as he said it, he thought he saw the way, rolling along the ground, more or less straight, directly to the north corner of the cube, stretching out of vision to its northern face, where was the place Rohan would regain the golden crystal cube and end his endless journey, finally rendezvousing with peace he so desperately sought. Further forward and higher up went the dragon. Terminus was indeed starting to enjoy himself. Rohan knew as much when the creature did a barrel roll. This was why he bound his bearskin coat to scales of the beast. Whitepaw was not pleased with this development and made that odd swallowing protestation a cat will make when it decides the worst of life has come. Then they were level again, and now the beating of wings was faster, harder, and they went higher. Glancing toward the ground, Rohan could see it rushing past ever swiftly. Meadows of every color and texture gave way to grasping trees, and then the trees became grass, and the grass became rock, and the rock became snow, and then again grass, trees, and valleys. Little clear lakes studded the area, and the beauty of it, bathed in the light of the cube, was something any living creature couldn't help but be enchanted by. The air here gave vitality, and the dragon growled like a purr as it flew. "You're not even at the best part of the flowers yet, my friend. You will truly feel it soon." Rohan patted behind the crest horns of Terminus. The dragon did another barrel roll and made satisfied noises. "Indeed," assented Rohan. What would have been months would now be a trip of hours, as the dragon flew higher and higher, beating his wings, soaring, then picking up speed again. What Rohan didn't realize was that in reality, the trip might become a matter of an hour. To understand how, we must briefly explain space bees. Space bees secrete luminophobic compounds, that is, compounds that react with light specifically. There are hydrophobic compounds like wax that repel water. Luminophobic compounds require a dimensional component owing to light's duality as a wave and a particle. Space bees secrete a luminophobic compound as they exit the atmosphere of a planetary body. Accordingly, light repels them faster than the speed of light through time and space. In this way, they pollinate the worlds as small bees pollinate flowers, only under their luminophobic, vacuum-exclusive chrysalis. These creatures collect matter from the worlds they visit, excreting it when they find new realms. In the building place, these massive creatures aided in universal pollination, preparing the stars for the world beyond the Sabbath millennium. When the time was right and the new heaven and the new earth revealed, what was built in the Timeless One's wood shop would be placed in its proper existence for all to see, for all to experience and adore, and from there the true destiny of mankind would begin. Naturally, plenty of infrastructure is necessary for such an eternal creation engine as the Timeless One builds. Also, naturally, it is to be expected that the mechanisms of design the Timeless One prefers may, in some small part, be used in ongoing creative inspiration. So was the case with space bees pollinating the universe to be. Now the hives of such creatures are the size of mountains, as the bees themselves are about half the size of a dragon-like terminus. Imagine a respectable bus, but with a bee's head, a bee's backside, and massive glittering wings. Rohan was not fond of bees, and that didn't change the first time he saw the massive interstellar insects up close. Certainly, they had their beautiful side. Space bees had a particular golden hue before secreting their luminophobic vacuum shell over hollow abdomens to transport life between worlds. This side of the bee Rohan had never seen before. He had spied them coming and going in the sky on several occasions and preferred not to remember it. Now he got to see one closer than ever as it intersected the path of the dragon Terminus, and Terminus was drawn to chase. They were actually quite well matched for speed, but the atmospheric conditions changed swiftly as they gained altitude until Rohan felt his breath as it was in the world he once knew. Still onward went the dragon, chasing the giant insect as it flew for the darkened universe beyond, intent on pollinating other worlds. It perceived them belatedly and began to weave this way and that, flying in an increasingly erratic vertical pattern. The dragon made deep noises and struggled to keep up like a cat after a rodent. Now Terminus tried to set the bee aflame, but missed as the bug anticipated the blast and made a spiral. The dragon followed. Rohan gripped horns and pressed himself into the back of the behemoth air iguana's head. White Paw's claws dug all the way through the pack and the bearskin to pierce Rohan's shoulders, and the midget lion yowled as well. Eyes watering as the atmosphere thinned and both great impossible flying creatures picked up speed, Rohan saw a veil of some kind begin to secrete around the bee, and in a second it became a line of light, zipping through final layers of atmosphere and disappearing into the great darkness. Now Terminus made an angry noise, but veered off and began to soar straight down. Rohan cried out despite himself. He would have worried about the cat, but White Paw was quite capable of keeping up his own racket from the pack on Rohan's shoulders. Now the dragon began to describe an arc, and Rohan saw it still flew toward the city that reached deep into space. Glancing up and over, Rohan realized the line of the space bee charged by its luminophobic shell spiraled past the outermost edges of the high cube, disappearing with distance straight up into the sky. The bee became too small to see before it became anywhere near close. The bee became too small to see before it became the bee became too small to see before it came anywhere near those distant edges like horizons on a cubic moon. They must have been, by Himari's measure, 5 miles in the sky, yet the cube stretched on and on. Now Rohan could see something he hadn't been able to before. The multicolored light, in part, came from the base of the cube, bouncing from mountains that occluded its total foundations. Now the dragon was intent on the cube's corner, which was still beyond visibility. But Terminus went in a straight line that direction. Well, mostly straight. He preferred to spiral as he plummeted until it was rather like they hit a wall. Suddenly, Terminus' entire body jerked up, about halfway down from where they had been as he chased the space bee. But Terminus was still facing straight down, and Rohan realized they found a high altitude airstream of some variety, like a fast channel in a raging river. Before, they plodded along at the pace of a nearly still stream. Now they were in the rapids. Terminus made a surprised noise, but soon found his rhythm, bowing his wings in a certain way and cruising right into the air. Rohan barely managed to get a bit of his undergarment over his nose so he could breathe. The wind was furious. Whitepaw apparently had no trouble in the shadow of the wind made by Rohan's back. He would hear intermittent protests from the cat, but little more. Below, the ground whipped by quicker than ever, and it was this that made Rohan think they were going faster even than the stream on which they rode through the thick atmosphere. Rohan couldn't behold the glory of the city long. The air was painful. He had to look down at ridged dragon scales behind the head of the beast, but he would peek out every now and again, and soon saw they had come to the mountain range he spied from the flowery hills near the dragon's cavern. These crags were great and tall and proper, white at the tops, separated from their green formal wear by an undershirt of rock, and rolling to magnificent valleys below. One of these valleys gave on the western face of the cube, still far in the distance, and yet stretching further in all directions than the eye could take in. For the first time, Rohan truly spied the structure's corner, stretching like a fold in the sky ahead. It was so reflective, you had to consciously differentiate between the image converted to gold and its source beyond. Even miles above the ground, they barely reached the structure's lowermost extremities. But the closer they came, the more wonders Rohan could perceive inside. Indeed, it was something large enough an entire quadrant of it could be a mountain range, or a sea, or dunes, and lose no scale from the world Rohan knew. The deepest point in the known ocean is only 7 miles. There could be entire seas with more water volume than all the earth, and yet there would still be endless millions of cubical miles of golden city. Rohan realized some of what he saw through the shining golden glass-like walls of the Colossus were natural wonders. They must have been. Terminus made a cry of joy and became faster. Maybe he smelled the gold of the structure. Maybe he hadn't flown in so long he truly meant to test his limits. Probably he was quite drunk from the drugs Rohan gave him. Whatever the case, soon they rounded the edge of the city and came fully over the mountain ridge, passing enough of the curving world to see the true foundations of New Jerusalem. Great jewels! Rohan assumed if they were equal in size, they would each take up a larger amount of space than the city, though they were thinner and splayed out horizontally beneath. The surface area of each jeweled plain must have been greater than 2 million square miles. Imagine one dish upon another slightly larger dish, tapering in height 12 times. Imagine each dish is a different jewel, green jasper at the bottom, blue sapphire over that, light blue chalcedony glimmering over the sapphire, then deep emerald green atop that, blue within parentheses of green. Now comes a sardonyx with a swirling textured pattern like some Tuscany design, beige and red and brown mixed together. now a flowery pink sardius layer, now a bright green dish of chrysolite, followed by the icy frozen blue of beryl and the brassy golden gleam of topaz, then the lagoon green of opaque chrysoprasus, the fiery violet red of jacinth, and the regal shining purple of amethyst, the top royal layer, becoming a wide plain right to the base of the golden cube. Now, stretching up from the base, probably 200 feet, was a skirt of jasper green that matched the very bottom layer of the foundational crystal platters under the cube. It was hard to make each color out from this angle. He had to squint, as they tended to blend together with distance, and since some were of similar hue, his aging eye would slightly conflate them. The magnificence of the structure had a shine like the finest cut gems Rohan could recall, and so did these colors at its base, surrounding it, stepping down from it even in incline, its foundation. They cast it in a glow that shifted with cloud cover and wind, constantly rolling about the city, making all manner of fleeting shapes more iridescent than even the healthiest dragon. The clouds themselves were an indicator of size. The highest of them barely seemed to describe the cube's bottommost extremities, drifting by as they did, appearing like their own mountain ranges in the sky, and miniature by comparison. A carpet of mist about a giant's great feet. The cube lit such clouds up from behind as they passed before it, and they reacted directly, swirling and diminishing along their journey as their vapor changed their state. A buffet of sunsets like no other. As the beast flew on and Rohan drew closer, he began to realize the colored stones were each a clutch of stairs that inclined inward toward the cube, hundreds and hundreds of feet. And across them, stretching for miles, were names. They were in Hebrew, spelled in complementary gemstones across each layer so the lettering would stand out. The names were repeated in different colored configurations of stone, but maintained within each of their unique layers. Seen head on, the foundation of these names, built on one another, read like this: Taum, Petros, Shimon, Andros, Philippos, Mattathiah, Yohanan, Mattathios, Yaakov Tzair, Yaakov Gadol, Nathanael Bartalme. And then Jude was followed by parenthetical marks in red stone around the following. These Hebrew words, Rohan, through the waters of that world, understood to mean Judas, not Iscariot. Looking ahead at the wall atop the gradually ascending foundation stones, he saw a wide sphere in luminous white that appeared to be a pearl as wide and high as the greatest whale, over 200 feet from the top of the wall to its bottom. It was centered on the western side of the cube as it faced north, that nearest Rohan. Above this luminous sphere, shrouded in jade, was the name Levi in Hebrew, spelled in perfectly measured calligraphy of precious stone. Toward the middle of the north face, Rohan was able to see far in the distance, like a small pea, another luminous sphere, as the one to his right quickly fell behind in the wake of Terminus' breakneck pace. The beast soared ever faster, following a stream of air that wrapped around the very cube, and the structure reached high into the sky. They were beyond the edge of the foundation's extent, as it came out like plates on plates, merging into one another until their purple crown bled into the jade base wall of the golden cube. Approaching nearer, the pea grew to a rock, and then to a boulder, until above this pearl, larger than some villages, Rohan saw more Hebrew letters. Judah. As they approached the cube, It cast no shadow, only light, getting brighter. But somehow, Rohan was sure the brightness it exuded was itself a precursor to what would be. In an obscure way, though he saw the colors changing and the glory of the structure seeming to live before him, he also had the impression that it slept, waiting, dreaming of the day when it would shine in fullest glory. However, despite the brightness of the cube, at the base of each of the massive pearl spheres protruding roundly from the endless structure, there was a shining beacon that took on all the colors of the world around it and reflected them, causing waves of light to dance through the jade of the wall and up into the endless clear gold structure. The beacon of light looked to be two massive wind circles. The circles had been put together, and they spun exceedingly fast, appearing themselves to be a sort of sphere. From this came the light, and as he looked at this pinprick in the distance, centered on the northern face of the cube under the Judah pearl, he seemed to see a face in it, but then the impression was gone. Then he realized there must be a face, a humanoid face, in all directions of this thing. But it was gone and became spinning circles again. Now there were even smaller bits of light, gold like the sun's fire, lancing out fast from the circles. And Rohan realized he, Dragon, and Whitepaw had been in the sky something like an hour. Whether consciously or subconsciously, Rohan had pushed forward on the horns of the dragon, bringing its eyes low, and they had begun their descent, and had slowed, and the wind was no longer whipping by, and he could see without tears. And as they came to land on the royal amethyst of the highest flat foundation stone, a great light shone from behind the pearl within the city, making the titanic curving gate to glow. Looking high, Rohan could see no end of brilliance. It continued up, past the air, into the great unknown, a highway to the stars, a plane to eternity. Looking forward, he saw shining circles within circles slowly approaching from the base of the 200-foot pearl. Terminus bowed down. Rohan disentangled himself from the dragon's horns and scales, walking over its nose and jumping to the royal foundation of purple just before the holy city. Terminus made an irritated noise at his face being treated like a disembarkation ramp, but took no revenge. Rohan carefully put the cat pack down and let out Whitepaw, who sniffed, looked at the circular being, looked behind at the dragon, then withdrew his head into the pack and decided to wait inside. Rohan briefly checked the map and his position. When he looked up, the circular being had come nearer, and he realized he wasn't as close to the cube as he first thought. Even atop the purple foundation layer, the green walls of New Jerusalem were still incredibly far away. Looking behind, he could see the stairs of the foundation stones themselves stretching into distance. There must have been hundreds of stairs per layer as they declined to a valley far away, itself coming to those ideal mountains. The circular being came, and with its approach followed the sound of music, which Rohan realized was emanating from the very stones as light, heat, wind, and scale came together into a hidden chorus of constant, heart-rending beauty. A voice came to him from the glowing circles full of eyes, a reverberating, powerful voice.
"Where is your burden?"
Rohan had to look down first, but looking down only revealed a kaleidoscopic, translucent endlessness of ever-changing icy stone grasping at obscurity. He looked back at the monstrosity and felt the fear in his gut. That's what I'm here to find out.
"Bring it. When it returns, I will open the gate."